All right, welcome back. So this is actually going to be the last video of Chapter 12. In this video, we're going to talk about what I call a morning charge, which is another special type of charging case. It's very limited in terms of timing, in terms of when you're able to apply it, but it's very powerful and it's worth talking about. So if you recall, I think it was in Chapter 5. I think Chapter 6, where I talked about how the best time of day to charge, I think it was Chapter 6, the best time of day to charge is actually right in the middle of the day, right? So when you first wake up in the morning, your body charges the ground state very, very strongly, right? Because its ability to charge the ground state or keep the integrity or intensity of the charge weakens throughout the day. And then you start to lose your ability to focus and things like that, which come from your ground state. And so when you get close to sleep, you kind of lost a good chunk of it. Your body's also charging your subconscious in a way which says you're tired and go to sleep, so that interferes with a regular charge. So it's best to charge in the middle of the day, right? When it's too early in the day, it's kind of hard to enter a transcendental state. And if you've been practicing some of the techniques, you probably already saw that. And then when it's very late in the day and you're about to go to sleep for the night, on top of it being a little bit hard to have the integrity of your negative mind's abilities, which includes rationality, your body also kind of is just commanding your subconscious in a way that kind of interferes with a regular charge. So it's just best to charge right in the middle of the day, right? But there is one time where there may be others, but there's one time that I want to talk about where that's actually not necessarily the case, right? And that's right after waking up, right? So right after you wake up, there's actually a very special state the subconscious is in, which allows you to actually charge very, very easily. So just go over this first point. Immediately after waking up, your subconscious is in a phase change-like state, where it has the properties of both its ground state and its excited state, right? And so we've kind of talked about that a little bit in Chapter 6 too. So we said that your subconscious, it goes through a phase change, right? I think I mentioned Chapter 6 and 8, where I said your subconscious almost goes through like a phase change. And just like when, let's say, water, which I don't know, we'll just say ice and water, right? When ice is transferring or melting, right, and it's changing into water, there'll be like an in-between state where its molecules have both the properties of ice and water. And then, it eventually switches more fully to one or the other. Well, more fully to water, and if it's freezing, it'll switch more fully to ice. When it's changing, it'll switch more to the properties of water when it's melting, and it'll switch more to the properties of ice when it's freezing. And so your subconscious is kind of like that too. When you're dreaming, right, your subconscious is in its excited state. Your body's no longer charging the ground state, so it's in a much more intense excited state than usual. And then when you wake up, your brain starts charging the ground state again. So you get your normal state of awareness, your normal rationality, logic, and your body's feeding sensory information to your subconscious again and altering your perception to perceive reality and all of that. However, that's almost like a phase change for your subconscious mind. Remember what we said in Chapter 8. Your awareness just corresponds to states of subconscious activity. And so the subconscious activity between when you're dreaming and when you're waking is very, very different. So it's almost like a phase change. And right as it's transitioning or changing, there's a state where it has the properties of both states, right? And that happens right the moment after you wake up. So the first few seconds after waking up, you're going to have, your subconscious is going to be in a state where it has both properties. And what that means is that, just to go over this point, is that this state allows you to charge very easily. To do so is to perform a morning charge. right? And that's why I call it that, because when you're in this state, if you first, for one, it's very easy for you to just kind of and I want to say enter a transcendental state, but that doesn't. I don't even know that necessarily applies here, because your ground state isn't charged as much. You're just in a transcendental state without really trying, just like you are when you're dreaming. So it almost doesn't even feel like you have to hold an intention necessarily, because you're just in a transcendental state. In this state, if you do hold the intention to feel some emotion more powerfully, you'll notice that your subconscious becomes quantized, and you can just do it using your subconscious instinct. So if you're used to controlling your instinct, like I said, that takes practice, but if you're used to controlling your instinct or using it, you'll notice that when you're in this state right after waking up, it's very easy to just feel some emotion more easily. Now, your subconscious is still quantized, and it does still have kind of a lingering charge from your dream, so you can't control it as well as you can your free will, of course, right? That's just how the subconscious operates. But if you still have the ability to control it much more, right? Or think with your subconscious instinct much more easily, right? So you'll be able to, if you try to forcefully control it too much, then you'll just wake up and you'll go back into your ground state or normal state of awareness very quickly, right? So you still kind of have to think in subconscious instinct terms, which, like I said, feels almost like a curve, right? It's not like straight lines or angles, right? You have to change something that your subconscious is doing. You have to do it slowly. Otherwise, you'll just wake back up. So you'll notice that when you're performing your morning charge too. But that's also why you get this property. So just to go over this here, a morning charge allows you to reach really high levels of emotional intensity when performed in conjunction with a deep charge. And so what I'm getting at there is when you perform a deep charge, right, your subconscious has a lot of energy stored in short-term subconscious memory, which impacts your subconscious while you're dreaming, right, due to the effect of passive memory. And when you start to morning charge, that ambience or that ambient influence from your passive memory makes it way easier to use your subconscious instinct while in a state to charge some emotion. So when you use it with if you don't have a deep charge and you try to do this, you can do it, but it's just not as strong, right? But when you use it in conjunction with a deep charge, right, this is really powerful. So you can reach really intense levels of charging intensity in that condition. Now, and what that does is it stores much more energy in your short-term memory, especially relative to some particular subject that you are focused on, which carries the main charge. Now, even though you can only do this for a very short time, so this sort of in-between state probably only lasts maybe a minute or two at best, but for the short time that it lasts, you can get a really, really, really powerful charge going. And I would do this, I use it for a different reason now. Actually, when I do use it, I use it for memory recall, to try to recall my dreams, right? And that's because dreams, like I said, dreams have a very spiritual significance, which we're going to talk about in book 2. So I don't usually use this for anything else anymore. I probably still might in the future at some point, especially if I want to use it to connect to God, which we'll talk about that later. Use it for that type of charge. But if you want to charge emotion, then yeah, this would be very, very intense. Another thing I've used this for is when I'm charging a belief, where, like I said, there's two kind of reasons you might want to charge a belief. One is for performance, which we're going to talk about in the next chapter. Another reason is one we're going to talk about in book 2, which has to do with the nature of manifestation. But yeah, I kind of discovered that. So we'll talk more about it later. But I remember there were times when I just kept charging a belief. I just kept charging the belief that I was going to accomplish something more and more and more and more. And I would just keep charging it throughout the day. And then when I would wake up, I would perform this charge. So immediately after waking up, and I already deep charged the belief, I would just start charging the belief even more. And I could reach such intense levels of that transcendental belief. It would feel so powerful, right? That I started to feel like almost something supernatural was happening, right? Because it felt like I was crossing over. I don't know how to describe it. It just felt different. It felt like the belief itself was becoming so powerful, right, that it felt like it almost had a reverberating effect, right? Like something just supernatural was happening, right? It's like I could just feel it. And at that time, I didn't know about the law of manifestation and how subconscious belief affects that and all that. Again, we'll talk about that in chapter 2. I haven't really gone over that yet. But at this time, I didn't know that. And that was partially how I learned about it. It wasn't exactly from this, right? But I did eventually discover the law of manifestation through subconscious charging and all of that. So that is also useful for a morning charge, which again we'll talk about later. But yeah, this is a special case for subconscious charging, where yeah, you could get a really intense charge really for free very easily because your subconscious is not entirely in its ground state during this time. But then after a couple of minutes, your subconscious is fully in its ground state, and then it's actually going to be a lot harder to charge because it's hard to enter a transcendental state right after waking up, after this phase has ended. And then if you wait like a little while in the day, you'll find it's easier to enter transcendental state again. Right, so yeah, that's pretty much it. That's a morning charge. The next video, we're going to start chapter 13. And we're going to start talking about how to charge for performance, right? So we've been talking mostly about emotions in these cases, but now we're going to start talking about how to charge for performance and how to perform well at things and how to enter the zone. And we're going to talk about transcendental creativity and all of that in that chapter. All right, so yeah, that's it for now, but thanks for watching, and I'll see you next video.